Today, Sunday's daf is daf Kuv Beis. We're in the middle of learning about a mezuzah. So the Gemara here brings up a fascinating concept of mezuzah, which you've heard about, but this is the Gemara here. It goes as follows. Hamaska by the Chavere, ala seichel las mezuzah. The Torah Rabbanim we learned in the Brayse that the tenant has to put up the mezuzah. Ukushu yoytze, when you leave the house, lo yitlena biyada, you're not allowed to take the mezuzahs with you. The yoytze, you're not allowed to take the mezuzahs with you when you're moving out of a house and taking it with you. But if you know for sure a guy is moving in, then you can't. But otherwise, you're not allowed to take the mezuzah with you because you're causing damage. Remember, mezuzah protects you from mazikin. You take the mezuzah off, the next person is going to have their own mazikin. But if it's ubenachri, if it's a guy obviously taking over, then you take it with you and you leave. Now there's a big machlekes Rishonim in the Shilts and others. If you're going to take the mezuzahs and you intend to put it onto your new house, some Rishonim say that you're allowed to do. We're talking about over here, you're taking it off and you're not going to use it anymore. So then if the way they understood the problem is not because you're leaving the house bereft of protection. They understood the problem is that you took a mitzvah and you're no longer using it as a mitzvah. And that's the wrong thing to do. But if you're going to take these mezuzahs and put it on another house, then you're allowed to. Others learn no. The problem is that you're causing hezek. Like Teza the Shabbat, you're causing hezek to others, and therefore it doesn't matter you're moving it to another house, and it doesn't help using it in your other house. What about this house? This house needs mezuzahs as well. There's a machlekes and poskim if you're allowed to take the mezuzah and put cheaper mezuzahs on, because the Gemara says over here there's more than just an avera. It's a sakana. The Gemara continues. There was a story with somebody took the mezuzahs with him. The yatzam left the house. The kavar ishta yishnei banav, and Nebuchadnezzar had to bury his family. It says, Maisa Lister, you're bringing a story that you said you're allowed to leave if the guy is taking over the house, and then you tell the story that the guy took his mezuzahs and the family never was killed. We're talking about the first case. You don't have to leave the mezuzah. And we have a general rule of sakana, we're much more careful than just an avera. So that's why many poskim hold you're not allowed to even take cheap mezuzahs, although you can. Machlekes if you're allowed to charge the new tenant for the mezuzahs you're leaving behind or not. So this is where it all comes from. This little piece of Gemara right here. Okay, so the Gemara further. It's just interesting that this Gemara is right here when the whole sugya of mezuzah is in two other Gemaras, not here at all. And yet this little piece is right here about taking off the mezuzahs. That's why it's so important to go through the whole shas, because you get a full picture only if you go through the whole shas. Okay, let's continue the Gemara. As ever, we're talking about the fertilizer. What's going on here? The and the seichel only has what comes out of the ovens. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a courtyard that belongs, that the tenant also hired the courtyard. The cows belong to the renter. What right do the owner, the landlord, have? Obviously, the seichel only rented the house, but didn't rent the courtyard. The toide the masket and the cows belong to the landlord. So of course, I need a mission to tell you belong to the landlord. Pshita. Like we're talking about the masket. The courtyard belongs to the landlord. The renter obviously doesn't have animals there. He has no right to put his animals there. So what are these animals? The toide doesn't come. That animals walk in there, and straying animals walk into the thing and they leave behind dung. They leave there, and who gets it? The landlord gets it. And why the landlord get it? You think the landlord has a clue that this fertilizer even exists? The landlord doesn't live there. So this supports Rabbi Yosef B'Chanina that we had many times in Shas earlier. Rabbi Yosef B'Chanina said, your chatzah works for you even when you're not aware that it's working for you. So the landlord gets, that's the chiddush, that the landlord gets to keep the dung and the fertilizer even though he has no idea that this is what's happening. Says when it makes a question, it says, if a guy says, my courtyard should be kind of anything that falls in it, I'm not aware of, I want it to become mine, it's meaningless. What do you mean it's meaningless? Didn't Rabbi Yossi just say that even if you're not aware that it's there, it belongs to you? That your chutz is kind even though you're not aware of the items that are there. So, and now I'm a step better. I'm clearly saying I want my chutz to be kind of. What do you mean lamaklum? Remember, it's very important. It's vital that your chutzah should be guarded. We learned about a slave, if you give a get to the hand of a slave, because the chutzah has to be mishtameres, has to be protected. And so privacy there, so it feels like a house. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And that's what we're talking about over here. Saying, look, the next part, it says, what about, okay, you're telling me it's an unprotected courtyard. But yet it says in the Sefer, everybody knows that there's a lost object in the city, and that ended up in your chutzner, then the word of kayamin, then if you say I want my chutzner to be kind, it's effective. But why? So what everybody knows that the Metzia landed by you? So what? But you're not aware. Why is it chutzner? And it's not Mishtamedes. Who cares? We're not aware. It's not Mishtamedes. Why in the world would you be kinder in this case? Says the Gemara. No, but everybody in town is talking about there's a deer that is sort of limping, sitting in this guy's field. So your chutz is kind of why? And my answer is keeping the Yotzel Hashem B'tzia Be'ir. Once everybody knows that this deer is in this guy's property, Mivdul Bedili in Sheminei. Everybody walks away, and therefore it's tantamount to having a protected courtyard, a chutzah, because nobody's going to go there, because they all said, it belongs right to Yankel. They have like a chutzah mishtameres. That in itself makes it a chutzah mishtameres, because everybody's walking away from it. They're not going to approach. Makes last another question. It says the Braisa, any fertilizer that comes out of an oven or a stove, if you grab it in the air before the dung is coming out of the animal before it lands on the ground, the tenant can keep it. But if it's in the barn or in the courtyard of the owner, and you can keep it. Now the question is, we'll talk about why you need refes and chatzah. The question is, if it's true, it says, if the landlord was not aware it's still his, so what if you put your hand there and you caught it before it landed on the ground? It's the airspace of a chutzah, and a chutzah is not just kind on the ground, the airspace also. So therefore, what right do you have to keep it? So the Gemara, it's the avir of the chutzah, it's the airspace. But Abaye is talking about it did not even enter the airspace of the chutzah. You know how? You took a keli and you attached it to the bottom of the para where he's about to excrete, and any excrement that came out went straight directly into your vessel, and it never even entered the space of the chutzah. That's why you can keep it. Rava says a rule that we had in Bava Metzia earlier as well. If it's in the airspace, but it's just passing through, it's not about to land. Lav kimunach dami is not as if it is as you don't say kimunach dami because it's not going to land on the ground. You put a keli underneath; it doesn't have to be attached, even if it's not attached. But because even though it went through a little bit of the airspace, it's not inevitable that's going to land on the ground because there's a keli, there's a pot right there. It's going to land in the pot, and therefore the owner of the pot is kind of not the owner of the land. Says the Gemara, me Pashla, Rava is so certain about this. Rava, in fact, asked a question. The question was, the boy Rava, if I throw a wallet, I'm standing outside, it went into one window of your house and passed out the other window of the house. What about the owner of the house? Is he kind of the wallet or not? It went through the airspace. Do we say that even though it was going to go in, it went in one window, it's about to go out the other window, the fact that it was inside the house as if it landed there, so the owner of the house gets to keep it? Or it's not like munach, or it's not like it's resting in the house. So the Rav himself was not convinced, it wasn't certain what happens if it's airspace that's not inevitable to fall down. So that's very different. There, it was traveling straight through from window to window. There's nothing to hold it back. So therefore, it's questionable what it is. Here, over there, when it's going through the house, there was nothing between the object and the floor. So therefore, even though it passed right through, because there's nothing between the object and the floor, he wanted to know, how do we understand the avir? As soon as it entered the avir, do we say you're already kinda because the ground is right underneath it? But over here, there's something intercepting it. Right between the ground and the cow, you have this pot.
We had this whole discussion in Shabbos, didn't we?
Sorry?
We had
Shabbos, you had a discussion called Klutli Commission Hunchadam. Rabbi Kiva said that it was flying and it landed. Yes. Yeah. It is on the ear itself, it's like it's sitting on the ear. But then the question is different. Because the ear is traveling with it, or it's sitting on the ear, do we say it's like it's resting up there? As if it's resting up there. Rebbe is the one who asked the question that if it goes through a house, in a house, maybe we say the whole house, the air is filled up to the ceiling as if it rested there. This is the question we had earlier in the Yuds, where if it travels through the house, what the status is. Anyway, Here, it's not like it rests on the ground because there's a utensil there to trap. Says the Gemara, if it's in a barn or if it's in the courtyard, it belongs to balabais. Tarti, what do you need these two examples for? If it's in the barn, it's not in the courtyard. The courtyard is not in the barn. Says the Gemara, this is what he means. That if there is a barn inside the chutzah. In other words, I rented, the chiddush here is the tenant rented the courtyard. But in the courtyard, there's a little section, the barn, and the barn is not included in the courtyard. I rented you a courtyard, even though the barn is smack in the middle of the courtyard. The chiddush here is a refes shebechatzer, if inside the courtyard, which the tenant rented, there's a little bit of barn, that was never included in the deal, and therefore any fertilizer there belongs to the landlord. The landlord. Rashi says, here from here now, if I say to you, I'm renting you out my courtyard, even though there's a barn right in the middle, the barn is not included. The Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you a question about this chutzah without any knowledge. You're telling me that I'm still koine. Yoine shayvich, the yoine aliyah. You have these doves that either have this chicken coop or the doves that, and these doves fly in and out or up in the attic. They fly in and out upstairs. They fly in and out. So you don't really have control over them, possession over them. But while they're sitting in your place, you can be kind if you want to be kind. The din is chayav is b'shiluach. There's a mitzvah called shiluach hakan that if, let's say, you want to take the eggs, you have to send the mother away, shoo the mother away, so that in order for you to take the eggs. So if the mother's sitting there in the nest itself, but it says there ki yikore lechos. Kikore means by chance. If you actually have a bird that you own in your house, domesticated, then you don't have the mitzvah shluch hakan, because it's only prat l'mezumen. It's only ki yikore. By chance you happen to encounter this situation. So it says over here. So if you, on the one hand, chayav b'shiluach, if you see, these doves that fly in and fly out, and it's sitting there on a nest on top of its eggs, you have to shoo it away first, because that's mama's a case of ki yikore. And ba'asur begezel, but you're not allowed to take it because, on the other hand, there's some slight ownership here. And be a mensch, the decent thing to do, don't take it away. No, it's not really a ganef, it's only dark yishol. Now let's understand. If you're telling me that everything inside your courtyard, even though you're not aware that it's there, is yours, so what do you mean dark yishol? You're a ganef. It belongs to this person. So first of all, there's two parts to the question. First of all, you're a ganef, as Gemara was saying. Second of all, then it's no longer ki yikare, because this belongs to this person. It's domesticated. Ki yikare, the din is that if it's not yikare, a chance encounter, but if it's there, then it's been designated, but it's domesticated. So over here, since it's inside the chutzner, these doves, it belongs to this person. So why is it mitzvah shluch kanim? Amar Rabba says, what we're talking about here? Beya. I'll tell you what's going on, he says, Rabbi. Beya b'yitzias rube u'dechayvla b'shiluach. The mitzvah of shluach kan is that even if the egg didn't fully emerge yet, but it emerged mostly, you already have a mitzvah of shiluach hakan. We can already say, beyim and so on and so forth. And if you want to grab a hold of it before it completely left the mother, you have to send the mother away and then take any of the, the chicks there. However, the mikani, but again, if you're not, because in mikana lekani, it doesn't belong yet to the owner until it actually completely inside the chutzner. And this is not like a soifer lehanuach, because the bird can pick it up and fly away. So therefore, on the one hand, it doesn't belong really to the owner, doesn't belong to the owner at all. So there's no problem over here. Since it didn't fully emerge, there's no ownership yet. It didn't land in the chutzner. On the other hand, the mitzvah can exists because majority of the egg emerged. So and the mitzvah of shluach are talking about that case before it actually landed in the chutzner. So you want to ask right away. So why are you telling me you're not allowed to steal because dark yishol? There's no gzel here at all. It's not even dark yishol, nothing, because it did not land in the chutzner yet. There's no gzel at all. So the Gemara, you're right. The gezel is not referring to the chicks or the egg. It's referring to Aima. It's referring to the mother. you steal the mother bird, you're gone. So you already asked, so why Dr. Shon? Okay, we'll see in a minute. He buys aim and we're talking about there's no mitzvah shuluach because in a case where there's no eggs there, there's no eggs at all. Says the Gemara, now, because the doves fly in and fly out, there's no real gas in there. But we're talking about the eggs themselves. We're talking about the eggs, stealing the eggs, even though it's not really mine yet because it emerged it didn't emerge completely. But nevertheless, because the owner is thinking about it, because he's secure in the knowledge another couple of minutes the egg will completely emerge. So therefore, or the birds will come back here, even though the bird keeps on flying in and flying out. So you don't really own them. But because you're thinking about that this bird probably will come back here, it becomes darkei shalom. It's not a full zela darkei shalom. The Gemara, also now that Rav says that you're not allowed, you're not permitted to take the eggs while the mother is there. She never says first send to shoot the mother away and then take the egg. That means prior to that you can't. That means you're not koined. I feel even if you say the egg completely emerged. Nevertheless, as long as you didn't shoo away the mother, so if you're able to do something, then your chatzah can work on your behalf, like a shliach. But a shliach cannot work more than the sender. Since you yourself cannot take these eggs, it's chatzah not. You want to know why the chatzah, why it's only dakashom, not exactly? Because you yourself couldn't take the eggs, and because you didn't shoo the mother away yet. And if you did not take the egg, neither can the chatzah then be kind of the eggs on your behalf. So, I don't understand this din. It says here the gzela here is sort of a lower level of gzela dakishol. I don't understand. Manushim. Either shulch, if you send the mother away, then your chutzah was kind of the egg for you 100%. If somebody takes those eggs, they're a ganef. Gezem alyu, they're mamash a ganef. Either lo yishulch, if he did not send the mother away, then you have to send the mother away, and you're not kind at all. So where's the darkei shalom here? Says the Gemara, we're talking about a cotton, a child taking the eggs, the lav bar shiluchu. A child has no mitzvah, so he doesn't have the mitzvah of sending the mother away. So therefore, the child can take the eggs. So the Gemara, it's a cotton bar darkei shalom. So you telling the cotton that you have to give it back? A cotton has no mitzvahs. So either way, he doesn't have the mitzvah of returning it either. Hachikam. The father, this is very interesting. The kid has no mitzvah of shuluch akan, so therefore he takes that, he could be kind of the eggs, and the father has an obligation to give back what the son took. Like they just had a court case in America the first time, where the parents were charged for what their son did with the rifle. They let him have the rifle, so they charged them with manslaughter. So the same thing here. We're charging the father has a mitzvah to return the stolen goods that his son took, which is an interesting thing. Mishnah. You rented this is interesting. We had a few times already. If you rented a house to somebody for a year, this abra shana. What happened? You have like this year, a leap year. Now, let's say you paid $12 for the year, but now there's 13 months. This abra benefits. So a year is a year. If he set up $1 a month and this year has 13 months, then you have to pay $13. This abra hashan and this abla maska, then the maska benefits. Ma'aseh b'tzepoidi be'echad, the story, an incident in Tzepoidi. A person hired this bathhouse. This is what happened. He said, "B'shneim asazav l'shana." First, they said 12 golden coins for the year. Yeah, but then he spelled it out. I want you to pay me a dinar zav every month. This is confusing. Is it 12 golden ducats for the year, or is it a gold ducat per month, which makes it 13? You see, the story came before both of them, and they ruled Yachleiku and Chayde. That 13th month, we're not sure what the law is, so you split it in half, pay half the rent. The Gemara, Ma'isa Lista, what's going on here? You bring a story that contradicts. First, you told us that that depends whatever you said. It's either a year or 13 months. right? Either fully the Seicher or fully the Masker, and now you bring a story, we actually divide. Says the Gemara, a couple of words missing in the Mishnah. If the landlord said, I want you to pay me 12 golden ducats a year, one golden ducat per month. What do you do here? You divide it. And then he brings a story. This is repeating the Mishnah. Okay, so they say you divide. Why do we divide? Because we're not sure. You sort of changed your mind. First you said 12 ducats for the year. Sounds like I don't give regardless of EB or not. And then you say one golden coin per month. So a leap year should be 13, right? So you change your mind. How do we deal with it? Do we focus on the first thing, the opening statement? Do we focus on the closing statement? And we actually had a number of occasions of Yesi, we had Machlekes Tanaim. So because over here, they were not sure which way we should go. They say, no, let's divide it. Like Sumchas, Yachleku. Omar Rav says, Rav, if I would have been there, I would have said you give everything to the landlord. You know why? In other words, pay 13 gold coins because you look at the closing statement rather than the opening statement. The closing statement was one golden coin per month, so it's 13. Micah Maslos, what's Rav trying to tell us? That you look at the closing statement. If that's what Rav is trying to tell us, Amar Rav Chaz, he already told us once. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Bei Rav. Rav Huna once said the name of Rav. Istra. Istra is worth 96 prutas. And a ma can sometimes, a silver ma is worth a lot more, but a copper ma is worth a prut as well. So they said, what happened? You say, I want you to pay me a Istra. I want you to pay me an Istra, which sounds like 96 prutas. And then you say, Mea ma. I want you to pay me 100 ma, which is actually 100 prutas. How much should you pay? Mea ma. But that was your closing statement. What about if he said first Mea ma, 100 prutas, and then he says Istra, then he says Istra is 96, Istra, you pay 96. So Rav says, he told us to go after the closing statement. So why does Rav have to make a comment? If I would have been there, I would have told him, I would have argued. We know what your opinion is. Says Gemara, Ima Hasam, if in the case of the Istra happened, I would have thought Pirushi Kamafar. I would have thought, not because you look at the closing statement. I'm explaining that different, when it comes to coins, it depends how much copper there is. So I'm explaining when I said Istra, I mean an Istra that has a better quality one that has 100 prutas. Or when I say Mea Mo, I meant poorer quality that's equal to an Istra of 96. I was just defining what I meant. So I'm not changing my mind. But so Rav holds, you go after the closing statement. Shmuel comes along, his comment is, I'm saying no. Shmuel says, Shmuel says, what happened was, in middle of the 13th month, the landlord comes in and he says to him, either I'm evicting you or you pay me for this entire month. And the tenant says, what do you mean? We made up a year. And the landlord says, no, one gold coin per month. You haven't paid me rent yet for this month. So either you leave or you pay me for this month. So therefore, Shmuel says, I don't know. I'm not like Rav that says definitely you go to the closing. I don't know if you go after the opening statement or the closing statement. So you always leave things in the chazak. You always leave things in the chazak. So for example, if it was the beginning of the month, then the house belongs to the landlord, and if the tenant wants to take out of the chazak of the landlord, he has to pay rent. If it was the end of the month, the money is sitting, the chazaka is the money is sitting with the tenant, the landlord wants the money, the landlord has to prove whatever he has to prove. So he says, but now that's in the middle of the month, right smack in the middle, you divide it equally. This case in the Mishnah of Rabbi Yosef, because we don't know, do you go after the closing statement or the opening statement? Whatever you don't know, you go after the chazaka. So it would be a big difference if it was the beginning or the end. It would be either fully the Seicher or fully the Masker. But the case in the Mishnah is he came right in the middle of the month. And since we don't know what to do, so we say whatever, he doesn't have to pay for the first half of the month, because the money is sitting by the tenant. But if he wants to stay on, since the house belongs to the landlord, he wants to stay on, he has to pay. But if he came if it came the beginning of the month, the house belongs to the masker. We don't know what the situation is. So you tenants want to stay there, you got to pay rent. Bob came to the end of the month, the money is sitting now by the tenant. You want the landlord, you want to take the money out of the tenant, then too bad. It belongs to Says the Gemara. So Shmuel is saying, I don't know which way to go. So the Gemara says, "Me Omar Shmuel loy amrin at Are you telling me Shmuel says he doesn't know if you go after the closing statement or the opening statement? But Rav Shmuel, it was once happened to Rav, both Rav and Shmuel. They both say, if a person says Kor b'shleishim ani meichlach, a kor is 30 saw, and he says, I'm going to sell you a kor 30 saw for $30. And then Yachol Lachzaboy, and then we start, I'm starting giving you the saws of wheat, whatever it is. I can change my mind afila b'sachrena to the very last saw, because I said I'm giving you a koir, a full 30 saw, and as long as I didn't give you the full 30 saw, I can walk away. But koir b'shleishim saw b'sel animachlav, he said a koir for 30 saw, and then I say a seller per saw I'm selling you. Then we forget the opening statement. We focus on the second and the closing statement, which was a saw, what do you call it? $1 per saw, and therefore rishon kana. Whatever, let's say 29 saw in, I changed my mind. Whatever I gave you because I said $1 per saw, and he gave me $1 for every saw, and that's it. It's too late. In other words, clearly Shmuel holds. You look at the closing statement. So why does Shmuel say before we're not sure closing, opening, and therefore we divide? The hustle time is different. You know why? The guy already took the saw, and because he already took the saw, therefore he can, because he already has it in his hand, the 29 saw he already has in his hand, we leave things the way they are. Says the Gemara, and that's the point. Shmuel says, I don't know. I don't follow Rav that says he go after the closing statement. I say, I don't know. Closing or opening statement. So wherever the money is, wherever the chazak is, leave things there. That's why I agree with Rav over there, but not for the reason that he says, because the close. I hold because the guy already has 29 saw, and therefore maybe he's right, and that leave where it is. In our case of the Seicher, depending on the beginning of the month or the end of the month, but in our Mishnah, it's the middle of the month. Therefore, whatever expires, the 2 weeks you don't have to pay rent for. In the future, you want to stay on, pay rent. Rab Nachman has a third opinion. Rab Nachman says, Karka becheskes baila medis. He says that even if you come at the end of the month, the Seicher has to pay. Why? Because he says the suffix didn't begin right now. The suffix began the first day of the month. Even if they didn't come to each other, we rather have to ask ourselves, so who does it have to pay? Doesn't have to pay. The suffix started at the beginning of the 13th month. And since the property belongs to the landlord, therefore, you leave the property in the chazaka where it is, and if the tenant left to continue living there, he has to pay for the full rent. So what's he telling us? That it sounds like he's passing like Rav, that what? That it's $1 a month, and therefore he has to pay for the 13th month. So what's he telling us different than Rav? Isn't that Rav? When I answer no. Rav says, I don't care the order. Rav says you look at the closing statement. I say I don't care what the closing statement was. I don't care what the opening statement was. I don't care, because even if we reverse it, first he would have said I'm paying $1 a month, and then he says and I'm paying $12 for the year. To me, since we don't know which one it is, and come the 13th month, the very first day there's a suffix, you leave the things on the chazaka of the landlord. So he agrees with Shmuel. It's a suffix, not like Rav. You go after the conclusion statement. It's a suffix, but you Shmuel says it depends on the beginning of the month, the end of the month. I say I don't care beginning, middle, and end. It's the house belongs to the landlord, and therefore he's the muhzik, and the tenant has to pay. Second, I'm going to say, what if I paid you a mask, I never paid you, I never received the rent. Who do we believe over here? Who has to prove? Amos, what are you talking about? Before the due date, you don't pay rent till the end of the month. If it's prior to the due date, we learned. And if it's after the due date, we learned. What are we talking? What did we learn? Now we learned as follows. You have to give pidyon a ben 30 days. What about if Mesa of the father died prior to that? The Cheskes Shalei Nivda. We assume that the father didn't pay. Even though in Gemara in Bava Metzia, which you're going to learn in about 2 weeks' time, that hey, there's a machlekes Abai and Rabba and Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says nobody pays before the due date. Abai and halacha like Reish Lakish. Abai and Rabba say that people do pay before the due date. So how does Abai and Rabba reconcile? It says right here by pidyon haben. So Tais over there says the difference is by pidyon haben, there's no mitzvah until the 30 days. So why would you pay before that? By a loan, I owe you the money already today. Even though the due date is in 30 days, I owe you today. So therefore, it's possible that I paid you. Basically gives a different answer. Anyway, the Gemara continues. So you have to assume that he wasn't redeemed, and when this boy gets older, by mitzvah, he has to redeem himself, unless he can prove otherwise. If the father passed away after the 30 days, definitely the father would have redeemed him. Unless we know otherwise, the neighbors say it hasn't happened. So what does he clear from here? That prior to the due date, nobody pays. Post the due date, everybody assumed pays. So the same with rent. If it's before the due date, he probably didn't pay. And if it's after the due date, he probably did pay. What's going on here? Says the Gemara, you know what we're talking about here? Do people actually pay mamish on the due date, or they wait a couple of days? Like you get a bill, and do you pay right away, or do you wait till the last day that says you have to pay by this particular day? And do you pay on that day? You give us another few days because you know they're not going to chase you up for another few days. Me of it in is the part of the end. The people pay actually on the last day, or not. And that's the question. We're talking about on the last day itself. Said to we learned that bismanai nishba v'noitl. It says here that let's say a person works for the day and he comes right away at night to collect. If he says, "I can swear, I'm prepared to swear that my employer did not pay me," usually you swear and you walk away, you don't pay. We had before more a few days ago. But in this case, the Rabbanan made a special takana that the employee swears he didn't get paid and he's entitled to get paid. And this is an exception because, as Gemara will say, we assume the employer has so many workers, he thinks he paid him, but he didn't pay him. And so he swears and he takes the money. Sounds from here. It's only in this case by an employee that we say swear and you'll collect your money. Because the owner is so confused. There's so many workers. Over here, in our case, but normally you swear and you don't pay. So in our case, here, you want the tenant to pay. The tenant swears. They have a choice: making the landlord swear and he collects, or the tenant swears that I paid you already and he walks away. The rule is by shvur, you always say you swear and you don't pay. So the tenant swears that he paid and he doesn't pay. The only exception is by an employee and employer, where we say the employee swears and he collects his employment.